Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to Week 11 edition of the Establish the Run First Look Show. I'm your host, Gary Hartman, here with you to start transitioning our minds from the Week 10 slate in the past, wrapped up last night with that surprising Denver Broncos win over the Buffalo Bills, on to this Week 11 slate. We're going to be talking about it from a DraftKings perspective on the main slate. We do have 11 games. We go rapid fire style here, position by position. First impressions on each play, potential spots that we might like to attack based on early looks, and we kind of dive through it, start getting ourselves accustomed to this new week in the NFL season. Before I do that, I like to kind of set the table with what kind of slate we are looking at. So we are back to an 11-game slate after a couple weeks of 10-game slates. We do have the same amount of buys. This is just because we do not have a London or a Germany game this week. So 4 teams on bye. Not many consequential for fantasy purposes. It's the Falcons, so don't have to deal with Arthur Smith's shenanigans this weekend, the Saints, the Patriots, and the Colts. So those are your bye teams. Not that much that is impacted on the main slate. However, our primetime games do have very consequential fantasy offenses on the main slate. Thursday night, one of our better Thursday night games that we'll see all year, the Bengals at the Ravens. Very excited for that one. Be sure to check out Cody Main and myself on the free Showdown show on the same channel on Thursday afternoon. Excited to talk about that one. Sunday night, we get back-to-back Broncos primetime games. We get Vikings-Broncos. So Josh Dobbs Mania, the Pastronaut, going to visit now a two-game winning streak Broncos team. Looks like maybe you've turned the corner post-bye. And then Monday night, Eagles-Chiefs, so a huge one. So that's all to say that we don't have the Eagles, we don't have the Chiefs, we don't have the Vikings, we don't have the Bengals or the Ravens. A lot of big teams on this main slate. However, I think it's an interesting slate at first glance. If we kind of take a look at our over-unders, we don't have any 50s again, but we do have a ton in the mid to high 40s, which, usually one of those has a chance to break out. We saw that a handful of times this past weekend. Our highest over-under is actually Raiders-Dolphins. That has a 48.5. Cardinals, Texans, surprisingly, I think if you looked at the schedule from before the season, took a look at week 11, saw Cardinals, Texans, you would not have expected that to be a 47.5 over under and with some real fantasy potential. But hey, Kyler Murray's back, looked pretty good. And CJ Stroud has, rookie of the year locked up, but potentially is in the MVP race too, is all the buzz. So, certainly 2 offenses that you could believe in for fantasy purposes. 46.5 in the Bears Lions, 46.5 in the Seahawks Rams, 44.5 Chargers Packers, and then everything else down low in the low 40s and high 30s. From a team total perspective, we do have a couple high team totals, 2 that are higher than anything we had last week. One, the Dolphins cracking 30.25 coming off their bye. Anytime we see a 30-point implied total, I take that pretty seriously for DFS perspective, DFS purposes. And then the Lions also 28.75 in a really juicy spot at home against the Bears. The Cowboys are 26.25 against Carolina. The 49ers are 26.25 at home against Tampa Bay. And the Texans, the aforementioned Texans, are 26 in that home matchup with the Cardinals. So that kind of sets the table for you. Some interesting teams to attack for sure. Let's dive right in position by position, starting at the quarterback position here. Josh Allen, who I know some people at ETR were into potentially getting the 20-1 Josh Allen MVP bets prior to week 10. And last night really just laid an egg from an upside and fantasy perspective. 177 yards, touchdown, 2 picks, only a 59.3 quarterback rating. That's got to be his lowest on the year. It sure is. And, did find the end zone at the end of the game on the ground there to kind of salvage his floor a little bit. But, now you get a Josh Allen that is absolutely desperate. They're 5-5, the Bills. They cannot afford to lose a game. Now they're getting the Jets for that matter. It's a huge game for both teams, but absolutely desperate. But you're at home and, coming off these 2 bad losses in a row. However, you get a Jets defense that does not make it easy on you. And at the most expensive quarterback on the slate, he does always bring a ceiling with him. There's no doubt about that. In week 1 against the Jets, I was in New York, only 13 points. Like, he struggles in this direct matchup. It's hard for me to say this is the quarterback I want this week. Obviously, if I was playing large field tournaments or MMEing, he'd be in the mix. But, considering he's $500 more than the next most expensive quarterback, and the matchup and kind of the struggles of late. It's hard to spend up a quarterback consistently these days with how tight pricing is. So that's something to consider there. Tua, though, also expensive at 77, kind of been the new norm for the Tua pricing in the second half of this year. We've seen a 76, a 77, and a 78 in his last 3 games. Coming off the bye, and this is a really nice spot for a huge Dolphins eruption. Yes, the Raiders look much, much better under Antonio Pierce. And, maybe they can throw some haymakers at the Dolphins, but the Dolphins are implied 30.25 team total for a reason. 7,700 at home. I have no issues at all leaning heavily into Dolphin stacks. Justin Herbert did finally eclipse 30 DraftKings points once again in week 10. I've spoken about this number a lot because he's only had done it one other time in a year and a half, and that was in week 3 against Minnesota. So very nice to see him in that matchup that did have the highest over-under on the week and definitely did hit. He had 323 yards, 4 touchdowns against Detroit. This is a tougher spot. That was at home against Detroit. This is a spot going into Green Bay. Now, the Packers are a mess. I don't think the Packers are a good team. This is a game that is has a 44.5 over-under, but he's fine. If you do it, I'd probably double it up and get a lot of correlation. But I don't know if I love that on the road in Green Bay. If you look at DraftKings metric, second against opposing quarterbacks, this is not the easiest spot. Dak's been on fire, 3 straight games over 30 DraftKings. That's really hard to do for a quarterback, right? 304 yards, 374 yards, 404 yards, and 11 total touchdowns during that time. 11-2 touchdown interception ratio. Really, really impressive stuff from the Dallas offense. Now, the issue in this game is, can Carolina push or keep this close? That hasn't mattered for 2 of the last 3 weeks for Dak, right? The Giants certainly didn't. They put their foot on the gas. The Rams certainly didn't. They kept their foot on the gas. This game, I don't see why it can't be more of the same on the road in Carolina. I do think there's also a chance that, hey, the Cowboys just lost Leighton Vander Esch. It's possible they need to play more offense to, make sure that they're on top of these games. But, the Panthers aren't really any threat here. I will lean into what we've seen out of Dak in this last quarter of the season or so. The problem is 7-3. So that's a big jump up. 6-7 was his last price. So now he's kind of priced in the tier above him. And, this game environment in general isn't necessarily one that I'm excited to attack. The Cowboys do have a 26.25 team total. I don't have an issue with it. There's a lot of quarterbacks on the slate, by the way, that you can really make an argument for. CJ Stroud's another one who we came into last week like, wow, he's $100 more expensive than Joe Burrow in the same game. And all he did was just throw another 350 yards and a touchdown. He also ran one in. Could have been a bigger day, obviously, if he had gotten to something close to like the 5 touchdowns that he had in week 9, but still at 25 points with just 2 total touchdowns. This guy's just throwing darts all over the field. Really, really remarkable stuff from him. Now he's eclipsed the 7K mark. And so it's hard for me to say that's definitely the 7K quarterback I want. But, home matchup at the Cardinals, lots to like about that spot for sure. Justin Fields looks like he's going to be back this week. You get a matchup in Detroit. That's not the easiest spot in the world. Detroit's given up some big games to quarterbacks, though, as recently as this past week with Justin Herbert. But they are a different team at home. Fields hasn't played in a while. The price is right for Fields' ceiling, but I just think if I'm playing this game, I almost always want Jared Goff, who was the cover boy of this video. First of all, Goff at home. We love Goff at home. He hasn't had a 30-point game this year, but he's also been kind of in that 6K range, which helps us a lot. I would think that this is a chance to get one of those 30-point games, 350 for 3 or something like that. We've seen it pretty consistently. He's been a very, very good quarterback this year. 2,500 yards, 14-5, touchdown interception ratio, 6,600 kind of allows you to do more things. I want to attack that offense with the second highest implied total of the week. And I like Goff for 300 less than Fields for sure. Stafford looks like they're getting him back, but I don't think I'm going to him in DFS with all these other guys below him. Sam Howell has been a real DFS and fantasy darling with a really nice floor, the way these Washington Commanders team gets in shootouts back and forth. He is a gunslinger. Like, he's really willing to air it out. 3 straight games of over 7 yards, a reception or a completion rather. And, 3 straight games of 28, 22, and 35 DraftKings points, he had another 29 in there. Like, there's a ceiling here. He's 6,300 going against a Giants team that did make his life difficult in New York in week 7, but this is a completely different situation. This is a reeling Giants team that should want to lose. And this is in Washington. And we just saw quarterbacks destroy the Giants over the last couple of weeks. Started, with Dak on Sunday. So I like Sam Howell at only 63. I also am going to keep buying this dip on Kyler Murray. Really impressed to see Kyler Murray was only 5,900. We spoke about him on the show last week, but they only brace him up 6,100. Gets a very strong, solid spot here in Houston, which is a team that's been giving up a lot of points, but scoring a lot of points, breeding those environments I mentioned. Second highest game total of the week in Arizona, Houston. Dropped back 32 times, had 250 yards through the air, did add another 33 and 1 on the ground with his legs, which was very encouraging to see. Wasn't rushing the ball 8 to 10 times, but still had 6 attempts and, looked like everything was okay with his knee. So I'm definitely encouraged by Kyler Murray, and I want to keep buying this dip. Trevor Lawrence has not been the guy this year. He just hasn't. One game of 20 DraftKings points, let alone 30. He's been in those mid-teens. Now, he's now all the way down to 6K, but he was 6K this past week. That was a tough matchup against San Francisco. You get a home division matchup against the Titans team that has been vulnerable through the air. In the largest field tournaments, he'd make my player pool. I can't believe we're over halfway through the season, and this is the sample that we've gotten out of Trevor Lawrence yet. I'm not really going to Geno Smith on the road in the Rams. He did finally have a big game this past week. It was certainly viable for cash, as kind of was our cash quarterback of choice at ETR, so that was good to see. Brock Purdy, a guy that usually makes my pool here at these sub 6K prices, and he gets a home matchup with Tampa Bay. So I think that is a good spot. This is all to say there's a ton of options, right? Will Levis, once again, you could throw in there, disappointed for sure. And I know a lot of people went there as their cheap quarterback in week 10. So it's not like something I'm getting super excited about, but he can make your pool. All right. Over to running back here. Christian McCaffrey's touchdown streak finally snapped, and now they raise him $100. He'd been 9,200 like the whole year. I think he had 1 week of 9,500, but he's been like 9,200 the whole year. Raise him $100, and now he gets Tampa Bay. The thing, who have had a good run defense for years. The thing with Christian McCaffrey is I just don't really care about any of it. Like, if you could afford it and you can get it in there, I think there's always a 40-point ceiling in there. So, if this is the way you want to spend up instead of receiver this week, et cetera, I'll never have an issue with that. So, play Christian McCaffrey all you want. Austin Eckler, I think, is going to be a league winner down the stretch. Now, Keenan Allen had a huge game in week 10, and Austin Eckler still eclipsed 20 points. Like, his role in this offense, especially in negative game script, like when they're dropping back, like his 7 to 8 targets are locked in, right? Found the end zone and wasn't even efficient on the ground. Still had 23 total touches. This is a pretty good matchup against a Packers team that's been gashed on the ground this year. I really like Austin Eckler. 3 straight games of 20 points. You get a discount, pretty significant discount, $700 from CMC. So, him and CMC kind of in tiers of their own with their prices, but don't have an issue with it. ETN finally had a down game, and I guess that was somewhat of a predictable spot against San Francisco. I was kind of coming in saying, hey, should we be looking at this guy as a matchup-proof player? Because he had put up 26 points in Pittsburgh, 23 points in New Orleans, 40 points in Buffalo. But looks like he is got another tough spot here, 7,200. So they raise his price back $100 at home, which is good. But against Tennessee, again, a team that has been able to stop the run, I'm iffy. He's okay. Saquon, no thank you. I can't invest in anything on this Giants team right now. When Tyrod Taylor does come back, which will happen sooner than later because they have to start him. They can't, as much as a Giants fan that wants to tank for a pick, I wish they could just keep throwing, get your shine box DeVito out there. But I think that eventually Tyrod will be back. And then we could talk about Saquon again. Until then, no thank you. It was really encouraging to see Jahmyr Gibbs retain a really strong role with David Montgomery back in the mix. I think both these guys are going to be viable for you for DFS for the foreseeable future. Gibbs has had a really nice second half of his rookie year, been very efficient on the ground. He's had some bell cow weeks, still getting over 5 yards a carry. Certainly has that roll through the air. So, somebody that we should be taking very seriously, even at a 7K price tag. 3 straight weeks between 26 and 33 points. That's the kind of good stuff we want to see to win tournaments. So no issues with Jahmyr Gibbs. This Dolphins backfield is about to be a cluster F because Raheem Mostert's still priced way up at 6,900, which is good considering what we've seen out of him this year. And it's a little down from the mid 7K prices that we've seen. However, looks like Devon Achane's coming back. Jeff Wilson's in the mix. I want a piece of this Dolphins backfield, and maybe with all three guys, and Wilson's probably not going to be in play for you for tournaments. Achan is cheap. Achan 6,600. I wouldn't mind a piece of one of these two guys, but they're expensive. They're expensive. So keep that in mind. All right. Going on from there, David Montgomery on the other side of that Gibbs conversation, he also eclipsed 20 points. We know how run heavy the Lions want to be. This is a revenge spot for Monty. They trust him on the goal line still. Like the Lions offensive line is so good. I mentioned the second highest implied total of the week. I'm not playing them together in a large field tournament. I know we saw Devon Achan and Raheem Mostert be optimal together. That is not something that you'll ever see probably again for fully being optimal. Viable, maybe. Not playing them together, but both guys are good. Breece Hall, I mean, the Broncos ran all over the Bills last night, right? The Bills have not been that strong of a run defense on this in Buffalo. Breece, back-to-back weeks of disappointing games. I still believe in the talent here, 6,400, something that I want in my tournament consideration. Derrick Henry's all the way down to 6,300. That is a huge, huge price drop. I'd imagine he's going to look good for cash this week. I want to see what kind of ownership he comes in at because it's going to dictate the Derrick Henry play. He should not look. They dropped him $1,000. That should not be the case, right? Even under, he still had 3 straight games of exactly 19 points prior to that. Like that's a floor. Sometimes you just need the raw points at running back. I just published a GPP leverage article on Sunday about this topic in general. Go check it out if you're an established run subscriber. It's not just about week 10. It should hold up for you. I kind of dove into that running back position. He's obviously someone that can always crack 24, 25 points. And at 6,300, that can kind of be good for you. So something to consider. Aaron Jones, had that nice week in week 9, putting up 19 points, but it's just not being able to be efficient with this Packers offense, even with the role growing. I like the matchup, though. We've been able to run on the Chargers for a long time. James Cook, what a weird turn of events for James Cook last night. Like benched in the first half, given the reins at the end of the first half, looked good. Put back out there in the second half when they need to score points. And honestly, the 2 fumbles obviously hurt. One that he lost. You could make the argument if they had stuck to James Cook, this team would have been cooking. Did not even mean to make that pun. On offense, a lot more than they were. 9 yards a carry. It's hard not to look at this as a situation where Sean McDermott's just not shooting himself in the foot. And maybe you would think, hey, I learned from my mistakes and we'll get him out there. 6,100 is a fine price if you do want to attack that Bills offense. Again, a little bit skeptical against the Jets, but you have been able to put up running back points on them. Rashad White has been steady Eddie the last 4 weeks. He just has such a nice floor with these targets and the workload that he's getting. He's not efficient on the ground at all, but 20 carries in each of the last 2 weeks, between 3 and 7 targets in each of the last 4 weeks, right? And then right in between 16 and 28 points, which is really nice. But we just saw how Travis Etienne went into the same spot against San Francisco. This is in San Francisco. Rashad White is not my spend down RB of choice this week. But James Conner with another week under his belt. They gave him 16 carries in his first game back. I like that. Brian Robinson against the Giants. I have no issues with that. Put up a 30-burger this week, was optimal there. We'll see if Khalil Herbert comes off IR. That's a tough matchup against the Lions, though. Same thing with these Houston backfield. Devin Singletary, the week after everyone had played him at super chalk. They didn't raise his price really much, 4,700, and then he goes out for 30 and a 150. Really nice thing, really nice spot there. You can get it to the Pittsburgh guys in a tough matchup with Cleveland. It's a tough matchup. You can get into them. The Ravens were able to run on them a little bit. So there's really a ton. I think this is a better running back slate than last week for sure. A ton of options up and down the board for you. Quickly, we're going to go to receiver here. Tyreek Hill back on the main slate, as I mentioned, with the highest team total on the slate, coming off a bye and his worst game of the year or second last game of the year at 13 points. Again, if you want to spend your spend up option Tyreek or Christian McCaffrey, there's no issues. CeeDee Lamb has been, as Dak Prescott has been cruising, so has CeeDee Lamb. 40 points in 2 of the last 3 games. Game against Carolina here, not as good of a matchup as the Giants and some of these other spots, or the Eagles even. But and he's priced up appropriately, but I don't mind going there. Stephon Diggs against the Jets in week 1 at 30 points. This is still a tough spot for Stephon Diggs against that Jets secondary. I'm not banking on a repeat Keenan Allen performance of 11 for 175 and 2, but good on him to show me, someone that has questioned his ceiling next to Austin Eckler, that he still has that ceiling. 43.5 points is serious stuff, and he's appropriately priced at 9K. Probably not someone I'm going back to, though. Amon-Ra, last week it all played out super nice for Amon-Ra, 33. I think that's a ceiling, 33 points, but like you'd obviously take 33 points on any given week, and this is a spot against the Lions. So I really like Goff, Amon-Ra stacks. I have no issues. Cooper Kupp is priced way down now, 8,100 against the Seahawks. That's a great price. This is a nice pivot. Curious where his ownership comes in. Devontae Adams also priced down to 7,900, and talk about game script and an opportunity to put up big points. And, Antonio Pierce, I think, squeaky wheel, had 13 targets, but this is going to be a spot where the Dolphins are going to score. Chance this game goes and shoots, at least plays up super high, shoots out. As I mentioned, highest game total on the week, 48.5. The Dolphins have that 30.5 implied total. Really like, I'm sure it'll be chalky, to a Tyreek Adams type stack, but it makes too much sense for me. Certainly Waddle if you need that kind of money as well. Thielen against Dallas, tougher spot, but has not put up the same type of ceilings under the new offensive coordinator. Still really good role, not the same type of ceiling. Mike Evans, we kind of like, oh, why does he stay right in these mid 7K range? DraftKings has him overpriced, yada, yada, yada. And then he just goes out for a 6 for 140 and a touchdown, puts up nearly 30 points. Very clearly the high ceiling play on this Bucs offense. They'll have to throw. The Niners have been able to beat through the air. No issues with that at all. No issues with Ayuk on the other side of that same game. We haven't really seen the ceiling since week 4-ish, but I still think he's Brock Purdy's favorite target. This is a pretty good matchup. Puka also priced down out to 7,100. Prefer Cooper Kupp with the discount, but both guys look pretty good to me. DK Metcalf, we just can't see a ceiling here. I kind of want to wait and see at 6'9". Give me Lockett, give me JSN. I'm not running him off in large field tournaments, but we have not seen a ceiling. Nico, all totally waiting and depending on to see who's available for that Houston offense. But man, Nico, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, all these guys have proven to not only be viable, but optimal over certain times this season. This Texans offense is for real, one that you want to attack. I already mentioned Lockett, Garrett Wilson, also cheap. I guess they gave a dive to our high ceiling receivers this week from a price perspective, if they have not put up big games in recent weeks. Obviously, Zach Wilson holding Garrett Wilson back, but look at this role. It's elite. I do not mind, especially 6'4" is a really good price, man. That's a really good price for Garrett Wilson. Debo Samuel, 6'3". I like getting into all this tier. Debo, Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, Jacoby Myers, if you need to save the money from Devontae Adams. Christian Kirk is still way too cheap. The Washington receivers are too cheap. Marquise Brown in that Arizona-Houston game that looks attractive. A lot of options. This is an interesting slate. And I don't think not everyone can get steamed up. So there's going to be a lot of very interesting tournament options. Quickly going to go to tight end. Only have about 3 minutes here. George Kittle is so tight end really ugly this week. If you think about it from the top end, right? No Travis Kelce, no Mark Andrews, no Dallas Goedert, no TJ Hawkinson. So, that makes things very intriguing. George Kittle was our most expensive tight end, and I like Kittle, and Kittle got there this past week, but I don't love Kittle when all the Niners offensive options are available for him. So back-to-back weeks with 20 points, but this week came on a 4-target game for 116 yards. I would not bank on that happening again. The matchup is pretty good. The price is up now a little bit. I'm not going to get into too much George Kittle. I'm probably spending in the mid-tier or spending down at tight end this week. Laporta looks great as an option in that Lions game at under 6. Dalton Schultz already just talked about. He's certainly going to be in play for you. Kincaid, really nice role in this Bills offense now. 4 straight weeks of right around 15 to 17 DraftKings points. Don't know about the ceiling there for Kincaid, especially against a Jets defense, but certainly going to be, I think, a cash option and just have someone that has a good floor. Ferguson has really established himself as a true weapon in this Dallas offense. Trey McBride certainly looks awesome. And they priced him up now from 35 to 44, but I would imagine he's going to be a popular cash game option again. If you go down there from there, Evan Ingram just continues to project well for us because the targets are there. And again, he had 7 targets, but he's not producing necessarily. I think he'll probably project well again, though, so you might have a little bit of ownership. Komet, I don't know if you maybe liked him better with Bayesian, but, I guess okay spot playing from behind against the Lions. Then you want to go down to some of these cheap guys. Musgrave at 36, finally found. Oh, no, he didn't find him. Maybe he got a touchdown call back. You had a big play up the middle. Okonkwo, 32, was a popular play this week. It still had 6 targets. You like to see that. Parr might be an interesting play because Gerald Everett left that game early. Conklin at sub 3K. It's as much as I like the running back and receiver week, this is an ugly tight end week. That's going to do it. I know it went really rapid fire there at the end. In and out in 25 minutes. Appreciate you guys all joining and tuning in. We'll be back next week for week 12, week 12 of the First Look Show. And of course, check out everything we have going on at establishthерun.com. Podcast coming out later today, articles, matchups, everything throughout the week to get you set up for this week 11, or check out everything we have going on in Established Run NBA. Can't recommend everything we're doing over there enough as well. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will see all of you guys next week. Best of luck in week 11.